I fundamentally believe that the best way to approach League of Legends balance is not looking to equalize or bring up the win ratios of certain champions or even bring down the win ratios of OP champions. I think the correct way to balance League is to address every champion through his or her identity and create for them an identity that has both very clear strong points and very clear weaknesses. For example, Zoe is broken. We all know Zoe is broken, but why is Zoe broken? Zoe is broken not because she has a lot of damage. Zoe is broken because she can damage you without ever getting into any risk. She has a very minimal time she's exposed whenever she casts her Q, so if you can get a Zoe out of laning phase, she will in general be very strong in most situations because she's so safe and she has so much range to which she can deal her damage. Why is this a champion? Why is this a design for a champion is what I'm asking. Not because I do not enjoy watching Zoe, but why does a very long range champion with a lot of damage never have to expose itself? I simply do not understand it. How do you counterplay this champion? How do you counterpick against her? And she is not the first example of a champion being fundamentally sort of what's known as having a broken kit, which the kit is not, the kit is broken, but the kit is also fixable. If you make it so that Zoe has to expose herself whenever she's looking to get a very strong paddle star, buffing it with her R, suddenly you have ways in which you can counter Zoe if she's more exposed. Maybe you can pick her, you can silence her and burst her. She maybe cannot be played into the likes of LeBlanc or Soraka if the silence were to cut the R, or even Morgana if she can get you with a Q close enough to you. Now you're exposed, now you're dead, and then suddenly Zoe is not a champion that has a fundamentally broken kit, but if you bring her up in the right situation, for example against a composition that does not have a lot of peak potential, let's say you're playing against a composition that's more oriented around kiting, so for example they are playing Trundle and they are playing Poppy and they are playing Ezreal, Corki and whatever support, Tankage. Let's say that's a comp your face. No, not Tankage, not Tankage. We're talking about Zoe, not Tankage. Who could you be? Karma. Let's say Karma. Karma should be fine here. So now you're facing a composition that has no clear way to engage onto the Zoe. Now is when Zoe should be absolutely incredibly oppressive and she should deal a lot of damage and she should make it very hard for the other composition to work around the fact that we do not have a way to punish the Zoe whenever she exposes herself. Maybe we can poke her, but we do not have a strong poke as the Zoe has, so in the end we end up losing standoffs. I think this is very healthy for the game of an approach. A champion does not have to be always addressable in every draft. It has to have ways in which you can counter the champion if you know you're facing it. So if Zoe was designed in this way, you cannot early pick Zoe because maybe you get fucked composition wise and everyone will constantly be picking your Zoe up. But you also can't build a composition in a super reckless way that leaves these sort of openings because maybe someone will pick Zoe into it, or if you play a composition with 5 melees, maybe Galio gets picked even if he isn't on the meta, and suddenly Galio really fucks up 5 melees because his taunt is really efficient, his Q AoE gets a lot of people, his R is very hard to dodge. So you now have a world in which champions are not slaves to their stats, but they are rather sort of answers to other champions. And this does not have to mean that every champion should be this way. There is certainly a lot of space for champions to just be all-rounders that you can maybe blind pick early if you want to hide your composition, or maybe you feel like by the end of your draft you need a little bit of everything in several areas, and a champion can fit that, and there is nothing wrong with champions being that way. But for me, the main problem the game constantly faces is that whenever someone is OP, oftentimes there is not a clear champion. You can say, oh yeah, but you can play this champion into it and you are fine, even if it will still be really strong and have a lot of win rate or a lot of influence in the map. You can be fine in this matchup, or if you build a composition this way, you can be fine in the whole game. And this really sucks, because you have now examples of champions that are just oppressive. People are forced to ban it. It is unfun for people that want to play the champion but can't. Maybe they just enjoy the kit. We have this stigma that people that play OP champions, they are like bad persons, but no, they can just enjoy the kit or enjoy being strong in a certain way that fits their personality, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you should be able to answer it the same way that you can answer top lane Camille with Poppy, and even if Poppy is not the strongest champion, you know what? The kits mash up so well that it doesn't really matter that Camille she's not super broken, top lane Camille, but if she was, you can still play this matchup and sort of be fine and build a composition around it that works really well, because the Poppy can kick people back, so when the Camille jumps in and the whole engage comes, maybe you can kick someone away and win in a 4v5 scenario and actually counter Camille's weakness, which is that she doesn't really have a way to get out of the fight. And this is really good design. I really love it that these sort of champions exist, but I just think we should have more of them. If we want to have a very strong champion in a regard, we have to punish him in another way. For example, Galio is very strong against people that have low mobility. Okay, that's fantastic. That's a very cool strength to have. Maybe then he shouldn't be as strong protecting his team, or maybe he should have a smaller range taunt that if someone has mobility, it isn't as easy to catch them with taunt flash. If someone has very long range, you actually suffer into them. Or, you know, you can look at a variety of ways in which Galio can be nerfed. Maybe you do not have a lot of damage or even any damage at all in the edge of his ultimate, but in the center the damage is bigger, so that if people have no mobility, they suffer more into the Galio, but if they do have mobility and long range and poke, it becomes more of a useless pick. And you can actually do this and go looking through champions, and for some there's a very clear identity you can incentivize, and for others there isn't. For example, Orianna, she doesn't really have a clear identity. She's sort of an all-around pick, and that is absolutely fine. You need those picks. You need to be able to blind pick champions in certain situations. Sometimes you end up with a composition that doesn't have, you know, a very clear thing that is needing, but sort of it needs a balance of things, a bit of mid-lane pressure, but also I want to be decent in skirmishes, but also I want to have a good team fight. Okay, you can go Orianna in this spot. There's nothing bad with these sort of champions existing. The problem is that when every champion gets addressed in this way, as if their kit existed in a vacuum and it wasn't dependent on the metagame, and it wasn't dependent not only on the metagame when it comes to what champions are being played and what you can play into it, but also the metagame as how strong is Baron? How strong are neutral objectives? Remember that Crab has really accelerated the game and really incentivized junglers to be stronger duelists. Remember that Baron, when it gets nerfed and it is much easier to take it without an ADC, it favors that compositions will not have ADC, because actually Baron, it's still not being discussed, but I think we are not long from it. Baron is really fucking stupid strong. I understand that it had to be buffed for the sort of like a way to end the old 60 minutes metagame of the beginning of the season, but it's really dumb that a team can just kill Baron and sort of win the game off of you. I don't think that's a healthy state for the game at all. I think that should also look to be sieges and team fights in other situations and positions where maybe your composition, it's not very strong at fighting for Baron, but you know what? It's very strong at fighting under a turret, and if the other composition does not have a proper way to siege, maybe you get outscaled. Maybe that's how the game should really work. But overall, because we are not addressing the champions, taking into account what other champions are being played and what's the shape of the map and what the map favors, a stronger Baron favoring very early oriented compositions versus a weaker Baron that can maybe favor play into the late game is not super fun, but you can work around it in different ways. You can make it easier to dive turrets, for example. So overall, I'm just very unhappy with this whole situation that a pick can be OP and there will be no clear way to address the pick. I think it's very, very dumb, and it makes very dumb, not in dumb design, because I understand designing a game and balancing it is really hard, but very dumb in how you feel in that spot where you have nothing to do, or not even a theoretical way in which you can deal with it, so you just ban it, which feels really whack. Honestly, it takes a lot of the fun out of the game. And I bring this topic up because Doublelift was discussing how much constant patching was affecting the pro players and their stress, and how casual players maybe they wouldn't want to come back into the game as much because we are burning them out, we are teaching them that they will have to learn a lot of things whenever they want to come back, so maybe they just won't feel like it. And Riot's response, I didn't really agree with the angle they took. I completely agree that it is an issue that whenever the game is broken, you should look to fix it, because players will be having an unfun experience. But I don't think the only way to fix the game is sort of this win ratio, min max, more damage in Q, less damage in W, never addressing the fundamental problems of a champion, or how the map or how other champions make the champion viable or not viable. I really dislike this approach, and overall I do not like that Riot Games seems to listen to the community this much. I think they should get a clear image in their head of what they want the game to be, and sort of move in that direction, and give tools to people to fight these sort of injustices that are natural to balancing. If you have a game with clearly defined identities, suddenly the fact that you maybe mistakenly were buffing a champion for 2, 3, 4 straight patches and the champion didn't see any play because the metagame didn't allow, but then the metagame shifts and now the champion is very, very, very broken, that won't really be an issue if you design champions around having a clear identity, having a clear weakness, and having plenty of champions in the pool, maybe one per position if you're looking for compositions or more that address these sorts of weaknesses. For example, like we were talking about the Zoe and how she should be able to be catched, or like we were talking about the Galio and how it should be able to kite Galio. It doesn't make sense that the champion is so effective at engaging when that is already very strong against certain types of composition. So yes, overall I believe that this sort of balance would give more space for Riot to investigate other more fundamental problems of the game, while at the same time giving pro players and casual players that will watch the pro players on streams and understand what they are doing and copy, which is how the metagame in solo queue often gets defined. They will have the tools to fight the OP pick. The OP pick won't be as influential, and then Riot can really focus on making the game fun long term, on addressing certain imbalances on the map that make no sense, and they do not constantly have to be chasing every little small hole that comes into the game, because when we are not chasing and covering holes, we can actually focus on building a good ship that will be good long term and will bring us many more years of good League of Legends.